All right, so Imperialism Part 4, and it's going to focus on Latin America. It's a great picture of Uncle Sam, which is us, bringing, pretty much everything, culture, technology, and everything. And this is into China at the time, but we're going to focus on Latin America. So here's a good picture of Latin America in the 1800s, before all the different independents. So you had Spain, which everything in green, and then you have Brazil, and then you have the Dutch and the French that own these two small areas right here. And then by the 1830s, only 30 years later, these are pretty much all independent countries. They're going to become independent countries. You can see all the different battles and everything that were fought by Bolivar and those guys. So Latin America, Spain, and Cuba. So Spain had lost most of its colonies in the Americas in the early 19th century, but it still controlled Cuba, Puerto Rico, and a few islands in the Caribbean. So Cubans rebelled against the harsh conditions that the sugarcane workers were put under by the Spanish. And what Spain did is they sent their army to Cuba to crush the rebellion, and they did it with brutal force, of course. So many Americans were sympathetic to the plight of the Cuban rebellion since they're only 90 miles away from us. And what you have here is kind of some cartoons from the time, making Spain look as bad as possible. Here's Uncle Sam, kind of a weird one. This one is done. This one might have been done in Cuba or something like that, and he's in green, and then here's Cuba right here. So they kind of had like a Lady Liberty of Cuba also, and then here's another one, us protecting Cuba from the evil Spanish, and then we were really promoting that we were really good friends, us in Cuba. So in 1898, the battleship USS Maine was mysteriously blown up while it was in the Havana harbor, and it killed 250 American sailors. So this gave us the excuse to go to war against Spain, which was a lot weaker at that time. So the United States declared war and quickly defeated Spain. As a result of the Spanish American War, the Americans acquired their first colonies. So our first colonies are Puerto Rico, which we still own, Guam, which we still own, and then we got the Philippines from Spain. That one we allowed to become independent later on. Cuba became independent, but kind of fell completely under control of American influence. So Americans also annexed Hawaii as part of their new colonial empire. So many Americans opposing the colonies, many Americans opposed taking colonies because that's what we broke away from, is being a colony from Britain. But others argued that it was necessary to try and keep up with the Europeans. So here's a picture of what was left of the USS Maine after it blew up. And then here's some of our routes from Florida down into Cuba, in the different battles we fought with Spain. And here's some more picture. And they kind of do it like the Alamo. So remember the Maine. And that was the big battle cry to get people all upset at the Spanish and go to war in the Spanish-American War. This is a picture of the Maine before it was blown up. So by this time now eventually we end up owning Alaska, Hawaii, Midway, Wake Island, Guam, the Philippines, American Samoa, uh, Johnston Island, so areas out in the Pacific. And here's a great picture of Uncle Sam kind of reaching out to take over different parts of the world. So meanwhile, the independent nations of Latin America, uh, in Mexico, Central America, and South America became independent, uh, became dependent on both Great Britain and the United States for their trade and economic prosperity. So really, the thing was, we got raw materials very cheaply from Latin America. We turned them into finished products and then sold them back to Latin Americans. So Latin American elites studied in Europe and they sold their cash crops there. Britain invested heavily in Latin America, and Latin America became part of the informal or economic imperialism, where we control their economy, we don't go in and control their government. So in some cases, military strongmen, so your generals, known as caudillos, would take over and they would keep order and they would maintain ties with Europe. So they were buddy buddy with Britain, they were buddy buddy with the United States, and they just kind of kept the peace in those countries, and they actually stole from the countries a lot of times. And then the Panama Canal. So, like the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal is going to cut the trip from all the way around South Africa to just going from the all the way down to Panama and then coming around. So it's going to cut it, a huge amount of time. So the operation of informal imperialism was especially illustrated in the case of Colombia. So the United States sought an easier access between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans by building a canal across the narrow isthmus of Panama. Colombia asked for a high price of permission to build the colony across Panama. So Colombia wanted a lot of money for us to build the Panama Canal. So what we did was President Theodore Roosevelt encouraged the Panamanians, which were part of Colombia at that time, to rebel against Colombia and declare independence. So Roosevelt protected the rebels, who gave the rights of the Panama Canal Zone a 10-mile strip of jungle all the way through Panama to the United States. And so just that little strip of area became pretty much the U.S. territory. So the U.S. then applied advanced technology to dig the canal, which took 10 years to complete. And this is when we come up with the Monroe Doctrine. So, on the basis of the Monroe Doctrine and its need to protect the Panama Canal, American presidents repeatedly sent armed forces to intervene in the Caribbean area during the 20th century. So, here's some pictures of some Europeans. This is a line drawn, line in the dirt, Monroe Doctrine. So, Europeans were not allowed to come into Latin America and try and influence Latin American countries anymore. So overall, the important ideas with better rifles, improved medicine, steamboats, telegraph lines, railroads, and railroads, European countries could expand into the interior of Africa for the first time, across the Pacific, and into established societies of Asia for the first time. These new technological developments led to a wave of new imperialism. A variety of political, economic, and social motivations encouraged Europeans in the late 19th century to take over these areas. So, new European countries like Germany, Italy, and Belgium wanted colonies to show that they were equal to France and England. European countries also competed in what was called the scramble for Africa to preserve the balance of power. European countries sought colonies to obtain resources and to find markets to sell their manufactured goods. So resources like raw materials, and then people to sell it to, like when they took over parts of China. Many European imperialists looked to dominate Africa and Asia as part of their duty. This was the white man's burden, spread what they saw as their superior civilization and culture. And the last part of the summary: imperialism had different characteristics and effects in different regions. In India, Africa, and Southwest Asia, European countries established formal rule over the colonies, complete control. They brought European technology, medicine, and civilization to those areas, but at the cost of suppressing local cultures, taking their resources, and using many local people for forced labor. In both China and Latin America, European powers forced local groups to grant them special trading privileges and other economic benefits, but they did not directly take over their local governments. And the last part: in some areas, European powers faced fierce local opposition to their imperial ambitions.